Hi, let's pretend that it's July. Let's just pretend. Let's just pretend for a moment that it's July or August because I read some really amazing books in July, like really good ones and some kind of bad ones, but a lot of really good ones. And I haven't had a chance to tell you about them yet. So here's the July wrap up, just several months late. Why not? I read 11 books in July. 5 were adult fiction, 3 were like middle grade fiction, and 3 were nonfic. So I've decided to set up the reviews that way in case there's a category that you want to skip or that you're more interested in. So as always, timestamps are down below. The first fiction book that I read in July was Where We Go When All We Were Is Gone. This was extremely highly anticipated because this is the short story collection by the author of my top book of 2022, How High We Go in the Dark. How High We Go in the Dark is a book I love. It's climate fiction following the lives of many people. It's a kind of a series of short stories that all connect together, that the hero from one short story is a side character in another. I love stuff like that. I loved that book so much, and it dealt with amazing themes of grief, loss, climate change, biomedical ethics, futurism. It was incredible. So going into this, I was expecting all the same themes, and I ended up giving this like a 3-star. And the reason I gave this a 3-star was like the stories were fine, but I could tell that they were drafts for the masterpiece. I could tell that they were writing exercises or occasionally just like some half-baked ideas that then made it into the novel that I loved and that were so polished. And just, I wanted more. I wanted so much more out of this collection, and I really wanted to annotate it, but I only ended up putting 1 tab in here. Because what was really cool was before each short story, there was this kind of like 1-page zinger, is the best way I could put it. And this one was my favorite. Support group for humans with demonic afflictions, every first Tuesday at Yogi Park at midnight. Help your human partner cope. Learn to control your habits. Makeup tutorial, masking your monster. Legal advice, game nights, single mixers, and your powers in the bedroom. From the Yokai Underground Quarterly. So this was fun. So this was like to advertise a story that featured some yokai. It had like a little, imagine if this existed, but it didn't relate to the story kind of beyond that. So there were all these little zingers that were awesome, but all in all, this book was, it took me a long time to read considering how thin it is, and I see how it's the same author as the man who wrote How High We Go in the Dark. If you've only read this, don't use it as a benchmark for his skill because his novel is so much better. Like, so much better. This was fine. This was fine. It was fine. It was fine. It was mid, as the kids say. It was pretty mid. Have you ever wanted to read what would basically just amount to fan fiction of the Secret History, and you've already read If We Were Villains, and you need a little bit more of that with some like fun writing and people obsessed with each other and who think they're above the law and can just do a murder? May I present to you these violent delights? Because these violent delights really do have violent ends. We follow Julian and Paul. They're both 17. They're super like misunderstood. Think they're smarter than everyone else. They absolutely like worship each other, which is interesting. And there's a lot of this like mutual obsession, friendship, things that become more than friendship. Maybe you're not really sure. It was very realistic. It was very enthralling. And this book was consuming in the same way that those obsessive teenage friendships can be. And the thing is, when you're obsessed, you do dumb things, right? I wrote in my review, you seek your own morality because it justifies your obsessive impulses. You lie to others because they'll never understand anyway. And you become further enmeshed with your partner. This extremely unhealthy dynamic is depicted so perfectly in this book. I wrote that my favorite part of this was that we're in third-person narrative, but we mostly follow Paul. And Paul really sees himself as shy, gentle, unassuming, and like he didn't really play a part in it. He kind of just like went along with what Julian did, and that's all. He just followed Julian. But we're given enough information from other characters that we can kind of judge whether Paul is as innocent and Julian is as culpable as this framing Actually, it's this thick. So that's fun. I do agree with a lot of the critical reviews that were saying that the ending was rushed. The ending is definitely rushed. And I wrote this in my review because I remember that feeling of like, wait, what? And I've just mentally accepted that Julian is Julian from The Secret History, and this is his backstory. I choose to believe that, just because why not? Life's funner that way. But the ending's definitely rushed. I'd say that's the drawback of the book. It's why it's not a 5-star, but it's a very, very enjoyable 4-star. And if you want to read about 2 toxic teenagers who think that they're like smarter and more virtuous and more moral and better, basically, that everyone around them, that they're super pretentious, you know, you're in a college setting, there's chess, there's entomology, there's philosophy, you're looking for that dark academia vibe. This has the dark academia, weird, obsessive vibe. It was really fun. This was really, really, really fun. Solid 4 stars. I do recommend it. Be warned, it's like a little... It is about as crazy as it sounds, is kind of what I'm trying to say. It's definitely as crazy as it sounds. I wrote my reviews for these books a couple of months ago, so I'm rereading them in order to make the video. And I really like my opening liner for this. Backman breaks my heart in many ways, but I think The Winners is the first Backman to break my heart with disappointment. This was another book that was highly anticipated for me. I loved the first book of the trilogy. I loved Beartown. It's probably going to be in my top books of the year. I read it back in March, and the sequel was also pretty good. I read it in May, I want to say. So then in July, I picked up The Winners, and I kind of got a sense of what would happen, but it basically took all the elements of the second book that I didn't care for too much and just really ran with those. I'm really inclined to just agree with some of the reviewers I've seen on Goodreads who are saying, did Beartown need a sequel? And I don't think it did. I choose to believe that Beartown exists as a lone novel and the sequels are optional. And this is because the tone of the sequels is very different. I mean, in Beartown, I was most invested in Maya's storyline, and I didn't find her character as well developed in the subsequent sequels, and I did find that a lot of the action that happened was really the disputes between the 2 towns and the resulting violence, and we followed families who we cared about and families who we cared about a little less. One thing that I've also seen people say is that books 2 and 3 could have really just kind of been collapsed together into one more cohesive and perhaps tighter sequel, and I agree with that as well. That said, it's still a Backman book. Like, it's still written with that, like, Backman charm of, you know what's going to happen because he tells you at the very beginning. You know, someone's going to die. And you're like, okay, great, who? And that's what you get to spend all book finding out. And it's equally kind of like hallmarky and mushy. You know, everyone actually has a heart and cares about everyone else, but also does terrible things. There's a lot of these, like, complicated human relationships, but they just, like, gush with emotion and sap, and I think I've described this book before as needing your heart sap vial to be dialed to an 11, and that's how I feel about it. So yeah, I really just recommend this for completionists. If you really need to get your fix of Backman's Hockey Town, this is it. I don't regret reading it, but it doesn't live in my heart the way I would want it to. In fact, I have a lot of frustrations about it. I listed them briefly in my review, and now will be a spoilery version. A short spoilery portion of what I didn't like about various plot points that I can remember months out. If you want to skip the spoilers, I've popped the timestamp somewhere here while editing. Okay, spoilers start now. This whole thing about Alicia, you know, the like 6-year-old hockey prodigy, and like talking about how it was all about her, it was always for her. Was it? We barely got to know this kid. We got illusions about what was going on with her. Like, we knew things were bad at home, but we didn't know anything actually about her home beyond that. we knew her through her relationships with other people rather than know her individually. We'd really like, I forget whether she makes it to the NHL or not, but like it doesn't matter because when the book ends, she's 6. And Bachman writes this like saccharine stuff about like, you know, all the books were about her. No, they were not. They were not. I didn't find it that compelling. And then there was Anna, Maya's best friend, who just like is grief-stricken in the second book, and that just seems to like dissolve completely in the third book. I don't know. I would be way more of a wreck if I were Anna. Maybe that says more about me. Then the plotline with Mateo. All I remember was that Mateo is supposed to be like the Dark Leo and was supposed to be like the counterpoint. It was almost like Bachman was saying, hey, I hear you. What happens with Maya and the quote-unquote justice she got typically doesn't happen. Typically there's no sense of justice or support or anything. I'm going to create a shadow plot to show that I'm aware of that. And I will make the brother of that girl homicidal. It felt like he was trying to respond to criticism, and just the plot didn't fit. It didn't fit with what, I don't know, the tone was really weird. The tone didn't work for me. And then there was this character of Alexander who was this like super gifted hockey player who came out of nowhere and then who just kind of disappeared. I wrote in my notes here, where'd you come from, where'd you go? Alexander could have just been Cotton Eye Joe. That's all I'm saying. And lastly, the reason I could put this book down for weeks on end was because it focused so much on Tails and all the politicians, and I didn't care. I wasn't into Beartown for the politics. I didn't not care about the messed up finances and Tails owing everyone favors and all that kind of stuff. I don't care. It's like exactly not the reason why I'm reading this. I'm reading this for the sap and the heart and the sappiness. I want the sappiness. I don't care about the hockey club's corruption. Okay, that's my rant. That's my rant about the winners. We did it. Okay, spoiler part is now over. I'm gonna just move on to the next book now because the more I think about the sequels to Beartown and how much they disappointed me, the sadder I get. The next fiction book that I finished is a book that I'm not 100% sure that I understood it, but I liked it. So I'd read some of Mariana Enriquez's short stories beforehand, and I'm so happy that she came out with this novel, Our Share of the Night. And this book is unreal. It's just so unreal. It's written in 6 parts with 6 different narrators in 6 different settings, telling a story of a family, Argentinian family, that's involved in some kind of weird, creepy death cult with pan-dimensional beings. I think that summarizes it adequately. So we start off with our main narrator, who's the main conduit for communication with the supernatural, and his son, who his son's mother's family is like the family of the cult, and they plan on grooming this child to also be a conduit. And they took care of this father guy who's the current conduit because of his skills as a medium. So he wants to protect his son from that, because the thing about being groomed into being a medium is that it involves a lot of like weird, creepy torture stuff and a lot of suffering and a lot of like gory, creepy body horror. I guess there was a lot of that in the book. There was a lot of body horror. Like, think bowls of eyelashes, or like eyelids, like just eyelids cut out and all in a bowl, or like people's fingers just all existing together in a bowl to be offered into the darkness. That imagery was present everywhere. So we have this really creepy family that's trying to like get its tendrils into this next medium conduit because they're trying to cheat death. Why else? Why else would you be sacrificing a child if not for immortality? And it's not really sacrificing him anyway. And that's not to talk about all the other creepy children that they're keeping in some kind of like basement cave. Potentially some haunted houses. a lot of weird stuff happens, is what I'm trying to say. I can't describe the book further than that. As the summary says, it moves forward and back in time. We go to London, we go to Argentina during the dictatorship. A lot happens. A lot happens in this book. It's like 650 pages, and it's awesome. I still can't tell you fully what happens. But some stuff is seared into my brain, and I absolutely loved my time with it. So the writing is absolutely gorgeous. It's super evocative. The horror imagery is memorable. It's gruesome. Characters are flawed, charming, awful, endearing. I actually got scared during one of the scenes. If you remember that scene in the house where you know what happens to Adela, that scene, I had to put the book down. I never put the book down. I like reading horror and I don't get scared. But I got fully like, I need to look behind my shoulder because I'm a little creeped out level of scared, which only happens to me with horror movies. So that was great. That was great. I really enjoyed that. I needed to leave the lights on. The main problem I had with this book, though, was that it did leave me somewhat confused, and I did find some parts bloated. I wrote in my review that the balance between suspense and payoff wasn't skewed in the right direction for me, so I felt like there was a lot of suspense and it was really, really good, but the payoff wasn't as rewarding. So I ended up giving this a 3.5 stars, rounded down, simply because the good elements, and I did like them. I did genuinely really like them, and I think I might revisit this book down the line. The good elements were really good, but there was a lot that I was not that into that I needed to wade through. I wrote that this book was basically a better version of Stephen King's It, which is a book I absolutely detested. I absolutely detested it, so I recommend this much more over that. So yeah, if you enjoy slow-paced, thick horror books and don't mind being super confused for like 90% of the book, and even after you put it down, and you like a plot that has a lofty like political backdrop, because we do really get into Argentinian politics, I recommend this. 3 stars for me is not a bad rating. This is good, and I think some people would really enjoy this kind of rating. It's not this is great, it's not this is life-changing, but it's pretty solid. It's pretty solid. You should read it if you're into that kind of thing. Okay, I didn't realize that basically all the fiction books I read in July were 3 stars. I opened this video being like, they were so good. Most of them were 3 stars. The last one being The Wool Omnibus. Wool Omnibus. I saw the first episode at a friend's place of the most recent adaptation of this. I don't know if it's been adapted before, but the one that like Apple TV or whatever did like this year. I saw the first episode and I was like, this is cool. I like the vibes of this. It's basically, what's the one with the train? Snowpiercer. It's basically Snowpiercer, but instead of being horizontal, it's vertical. Okay, I liked Snowpiercer. Bring on wool. So I picked up the book. I really liked the first section. So I think the book is divided into 5 sections or so. I really liked it. Then the next few sections, I was like, all right, this is fine, a little slow. And then the last one just kind of lost me. To quote my review, I like my sci-fi focused on social commentary and dialed as far away from blockbuster action vibes as possible. Like, I don't need characters to die in a showdown for a plot filler. I don't need our villain to like get his comeuppance. I don't need the main characters to finally kiss. I don't need like the string quartet that implies that everything is fine, but there might still be a sequel. Like, it was very Hollywood-esque. Like, there was just a very clear tone shift. I'd say like around the 4th and especially the 5th segment of the book, and it went from having this omnibus be really like mysterious and bleak and keeping me up late to like me being like, did I just watch a Hollywood blockbuster that was kind of generic? So I went and read some like low reviews and read a little bit more about the history of the book, and one thing I didn't know is that this was self-published when it first happened. So The first section was self-published by itself, and people loved it. It was like a self-publishing hit. So Hugh Howey was like, right, that's his name, Hugh Howey, was like, I'm gonna deliver more. People like this wool thing. And it seems like it turned into fan service. At least for me, like the tonal shift and the quality of the first story compared to the rest of the anthology is striking. And it's really made me wonder whether I want to read the other two books, like the other two compendiums or whatever they're called, and or watch the TV show. Like, one thing I remember in the TV show was that there was a lot of emphasis on reproductive control, and I found that really interesting. So the first episode, the whole plot of it revolved around how a couple has 1 year to conceive until they're forcibly sterilized again. I thought that was really interesting. And it's like, why is there so much strict population control going on in the silos? But I don't feel like sitting through more of like the tone of the last section of this book just to get a little bit of those themes. I've seen those themes done well in other books, so I don't know. Can you let me know if the other two are more in line with like the first half of this or the second half of this? Because I didn't like the second half. And I really wanted to annotate it, but again, not a lot of annotations. I think 2 of them were just like in references to the word wool, because I was like, ah, yes, the wool's been pulled out from under their eyes, from in front of their eyes. I can't do expressions. So yeah, 3 stars. I recommend this if you like the idea of a vertical snowpiercer. So a tower where the rich people are at the top, the poor people are at the bottom, and we have a unlikely heroine from the bottom, unwilling and unlikely heroine, who realizes that actually this is a very corrupt society and needs to do something about it. For some reason, she is frequently extremely naked in this book. Like, repeatedly. It gets really weird. My last little snide comment in the review was like, the morality is really unambiguous. I think this is why I'm just like thrashing this book around. Like, it's very like, here are the good guys, here are the bad guys. And I just, it's not what I want. That's not what I want out of a book. So if this were only written like the second half, it would be like a 1 or 2 star. The reason I gave this 3 stars is literally because the first fifth of this, the first segment, novella, whatever, is incredible. Like, genuinely very, very good. I understand why it was such a hit. And if you're going to read any of it, read that one. If you're going to keep going, know that it doesn't stay like that. And yeah, I don't know whether to keep going with the series or not. Let me know. Let me know, because I don't know. While I was reading these like chonky fiction books, I figured, why not listen to something I remember liking as a kid? I didn't remember a lot about it, but I was like, oh, I read Philip Pullman as a child, and I really liked The Golden Compass. I read all 3 of his Dark Materials as a child when I was like 12. I liked The Golden Compass, and then I also read his, like, I think her name was Scarlet or something. The one with the, like, Victorian single mom who gets up in, like, London's underbelly and gets involved in crime. Anyway, he had a separate book series that I was really into as well. So I decided to listen to the audiobook of The Golden Compass, and it was all right. It was all right, but it reads very juvenile, which is what it's supposed to be. It's absolutely supposed to be middle grade and for kids. I was just really hoping to find a little more charm in it than I actually did. The early parts, funnily enough, really reminded me of Babel, like the Dark Academia book for adults. I was just like, wait, was The Golden Compass the original Dark Academia? Are we now all into Dark Academia because we liked The Golden Compass when we were kids? Maybe. I didn't remember that Lyra was in Oxford. I didn't remember that she was friends with a polar bear warrior. Okay, I didn't remember much. I just remember the little animal companions and something about souls and the church. That was largely what I remembered. And that's pretty much what I remember from my reread too. And like, it was fine. Oh yeah, and I listened to the audiobook and it was a full cast recording, and that was a mistake. So normally I love full cast recordings. They can be so incredible. They can be so good. But, and it feels so wrong to say this. It feels so wrong to call a 12-year-old girl irritating, because I love and protect teenage girls and I want to do that. But there was something about the way that the actress was reading Lyra. The precociousness of the Victorian child prodigy. Constantly saying, but we must protect the urchin children. They're people too. You mustn't be cruel to them. You mustn't. Really, I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. I was like visibly wincing when I would listen to the book. And then just the events got really repetitive. It was like there was a battle, a resolution, a battle, a resolution, a battle, a resolution, and then a little Deus Ex Machina so that we can finish the book. So the nostalgia factor didn't outweigh my annoyance. And I was thinking about reading the whole trilogy, like rereading it as an adult, and now I kind of really don't want to. So yeah, I recommend this if you're looking for that nostalgia factor and you want a YA fantasy with a precocious narrator, lots of battles that they win, because why not? And capital evil, capital adults. I gave it 2 stars because objectively it's pretty good. It's pretty good. Like, I definitely see why other people like this. I see why other people love this, but it did not resonate with adult me. It resonated with childhood me, and it can stay there. It can stay 15 years ago when I first picked this up and was delighted by it. It just didn't land in the same way nowadays. Just didn't land. The other 2 middle grade books that I read were both graphic novels, and they were both graphic novels by Kay O'Neill. The first one was a standalone. It's called The Moth Keeper. It's about a child in a village whose job is to take care of the moths. Everyone else is asleep during this time, so it's a very lonely job, but it's a very rewarding job. And this is kind of just what it says on the tin. So the main sort of like conflict in this short graphic novel is that Anya, or Moth Keeper, wants to see the sun. And just the art in the book is incredible. So we get gorgeous, gorgeous pictures of this society that lives in a desert surrounded by lunar moths. We get gorgeous drawings of nighttime and phases of the moon passing through the sky, and just the visual language. The illustrations are just out of this world. Absolutely beautiful. And then we are suddenly plunged into daylight, and they're beautiful in a different way. I really liked this. It was cute. Like, it wasn't like life-changing or anything, but it was genuinely really cute. One thing that I learned that Kay O'Neill does that I really like is that their art really communicates the story and like the passage of time. So dialogue can be used very sparsely because we read so much off of like facial expressions and movements of the characters and some of like the visual language present in the comic. I found that really striking. There's these like sweeping panels. Yeah, the one that I wrote about in my review and that I already mentioned is like a sweeping panel of the desert with like phases of the moon to show that a month has passed, and just the way it's illustrated is absolutely gorgeous. It was just a really clever way to say like a few months later instead of actually just writing that. Like with a lot of kids' books, I mean, I'm very harsh. I'm very harsh when I criticize middle grade books because I tend to find them too simple and the world building lackluster, and it's because I'm not the target audience. But the thing is that I do struggle to connect with the hero's journey, and I want to like these cute books. I love the art, they're adorable. But I just didn't, like, I liked it, but I didn't love it. I didn't think this was the greatest thing ever. I do recommend it if you love beautiful art, if you like stories of like a solitary child trying to find their place in the world, and you just want like a quick middle grade read. It's not life-changing, but it's adorable. The other book by the same author that I grabbed, though, was The Tea Dragon Society, and this one got a 4 stars because this one made its way past my adult defenses and into my little heart and made it grow 3 sizes. My Grinch self liked this a lot. I made a list in my review of reasons that this resonated with me. Are you ready? I too love being followed around by little companions that I've pair bonded with. This book just reminded me of my cats. That's why I loved it. It just reminded me of my cats. I too struggle with memory issues. That has been a really big problem in the past 6 months or so with my health. I feel a little sharper lately. It's quite nice, but especially around the time I was reading this book, I was having a lot of memory issues. I too love a good tea, and I still love a good tea. Tea's amazing. And then the last reason, I too cannot resist a big dose of wholesome sap. Reading my review and I absolutely love it. My only criticism is that there was no matcha tea in the Dragon Compendium. I need a matcha dragon. Also, I need crochet patterns for the tea dragons, like especially chamomile. Like, I would love to have a little chamomile. I need a little chamomile. I don't know why I'm saying I would love to. I need to make a little chamomile. Beside the point though, the plot in this book is really simple, but I found it a lot more fun. It was a very kind of straightforward coming of age, found family, gentleness, a little bit of recovery, but I found just like the balance of all the emotional notes was much more right than it was in The Mothkeeper. And the art is sublime. Like, just sublime. Everything I said about The Mothkeeper applies here too. And I didn't think that I'd want to own like a middle grade graphic novel, but like, I think I want to buy this because it is just so cute. So if you like graphic novels and you like that like cute vibe from Ghibli movies, there's a little Totoro right there just to show you what I'm talking about. If you like that vibe and you're in the mood for like whimsical art that's tender, doesn't take itself too seriously, this is adorable. This is absolutely adorable. And it's like 50 pages long. Like, just read it. It's cute. It's really cute. And if you know of crochet patterns or any other craft that I can make tea dragons in, please. I need one. I need one. Or I should just dress my cat up as a tea dragon. I mean, that would be also effective. Can't talk about nonfiction. Thinking about snails. Okay, so this book is exactly what it says on the tin. It's just snail vibes only. It's divided into a bunch of short chapters, and each one is preceded by either like poetry about snails or excerpts from like old botanical texts dating from the 18th or the 19th century telling us about snails. Snail vibes only. But what attracted me to this book is it's actually a nonfiction account of a woman's recovery or bout with post-viral illness. So for those of you who've been on the channel for a while, you know that I was sick with a series of viruses over the winter and my body hasn't fully bounced back yet. I'm like doing much better than I was. It comes and goes. But I've been really interested in these kind of post-viral illnesses and how people deal with them, because there isn't much you can do other than just listen to your body, rest, take care of yourself, treat symptoms as they arise. That's basically what we know how to do with them. And the author of this was so sick post-virally that she was essentially bedbound. The way she coped with that was really by like watching nature. So she gets this snail that starts living in a little jar. She feeds it. So during the day she observes, where's the snail going? Where does he like, what are his favorite haunts? Where does he go to the bathroom? At one point there's baby snails that happen. I lost my mind. I was so ready. I'm sorry if that was a spoiler. I loved the baby snails. That was the best. And we just learn a lot about this snail, and she doesn't have anything to do. She's too tired to do anything. She's too tired to get out of bed. So she's just really watching this snail and getting really into the snail. And it's just a way to connect with the natural world around her to help her wait out the worst stages of her post-viral illness. So I really recommend this if you, in general, just enjoy contemplating the natural world and its awe. If you're interested in kind of how nature has different paces, right? Some animals in nature move very fast, but most things move way slower than we do. Snails, plants, like I've been reading a lot of nature writing when I read about trees or fungi, I'm like, wow, just the time scales are so different and so striking, I guess, in contrast to us. And this is also a great meditation on coping with your own limitations, especially medical ones. So this book did me a lot of good. This was a slim little thing, and I'm really, really glad it came into my orbit. This was a 4-star read. Finally, a 5-star read. This is the 5-star read of July. This is the 5-star read of July, and it is, to say it politely, BS jobs. If you've never heard of this concept, the author originally released an article about it. And in this article, talked about the fact that it's kind of wild that we have all this time-saving tech. We have this extremely educated population. We're talking about like the Western, like especially North American and European world. Why are people working 40 hours a week at things that don't seem to particularly even serve society? They really just seemed like a lot of office jobs don't need to exist. And this book was written before the pandemic, but we really saw this in the pandemic. Like, a lot of people realized they could just not do their job for 3 months and society didn't come crashing down because those jobs aren't actually useful. There's a lot of jobs in society that really are useful and very, very important. Those are the ones that the moment they stop, we notice them. Those are things like anyone and everyone involved in feeding the rest of us, anyone and everyone involved in our healthcare, involved in maintenance of the city or cleanliness or anything like that. Having our heat and water function, all these sorts of basics. But those of us that have email jobs, for lack of a better word, where our job is just sending emails and receiving emails and answering more emails, a lot of that is a little bit superfluous. And what I found fascinating about this book is it talked about the morality of work and socially why we think that it's essential that everyone have a job, and how there really is a phenomenon that jobs are created for the sake of making sure that some people just have jobs, not because it actually has to be done. This book does end up in pro-universal basic income territory, and universal basic income is a topic I'm very interested in. So any book that supports UBI, I'm immediately going to read about it and want to understand more. One thing I really appreciated is that this book engaged with some really interesting questions that can arise around the concept of BS jobs. So, for instance, why do they exist in a capitalist society where we should be prioritizing efficiency and profit? Like, what's the point of just paying people if what they're doing is useless? What are the psychological and societal effects on people when they realize that they have these kind of meaningless jobs? And why does it feel so soul-crushing to be paid a lot of money when you're doing nothing, or when you're doing nothing of value? How do people actually cope with this? And like, it sounds like the dream to a lot of people, but then when you find yourself in that situation, it's like, this is not the dream. And another question that it grappled with that I absolutely loved is, why are jobs that are important, like very important, like let's say teachers are something that we need socially quite desperately, actually. Teachers are very important, but they're completely undervalued and completely underpaid. So all these kinds of questions, and looking at historical and sociological factors that got us into this mess, trying to think of the ways out. UBI is in there, but the author really does talk about how he's trying to highlight the problems rather than the solutions, because someone does need to just spell out the problems. And I think he grapples with the ideas in a really interesting way. And I do appreciate that he was very transparent to sort of like where he was coming from and what position he was trying to argue, and did try to offer some counterexamples and engage with some counter arguments in good faith. And that's always something I appreciate in this kind of nonfiction. So if I were the author, I'd be kicking myself for not having published this post 2020. I'd be working on a review, like on a sequel, a review of this book, sequel, whatever. But yeah, it reads a little bit prophetically now. So if you're in your late 20s or early 30s and you are surrounded by friends, acquaintances, managers, and wondering what they do all day, and you can't seem to really understand what they're doing, I recommend reading this. If you're interested in exploring ideas around like work and idleness and laziness and human happiness and the morality of all of that, and if you're generally frustrated with the state of things, I really recommend this book, or at the very least, the short article that preceded it. It's absolutely fantastic. And I listened to this on audiobook, and the audiobook was very good. Very good. When I picked up Unwell Women, I really just wanted to read the book Doing Harm again because, I'm really interested in medical misogyny. I'm really interested in, like, criticizing the medical establishment from a feminist perspective. And I thought that that's what this would be about, since it was diagnosis and misdiagnosis in a man-made world, or something like that. Misdiagnosis and myth in a man-made world. That's the subtitle. And that's not what this was about. This didn't have much of a modern perspective. It was a historical sociological survey of the concept of the woman going back to ancient Greece. So we talk about ancient Greece, witch trials, hysteria, lobotomies, the yellow wallpaper, Roe v. Wade, the pill, chronic fatigue syndrome. It's quite comprehensive, and I really did appreciate that. That said, the book did suffer from some like balance issues. So it really emphasized, let's say, like hysteria, and really sat a very long time in ancient Greece specifically, which I found kind of exhausting past a certain point, and didn't sit a lot in some of the modern stuff that I would have wanted to hear more about. There were just certain turns of phrases that felt like they were more about virtue signaling than communicating an actual point, and I found this very frustrating. I understand why these were edited in, and they really do feel out of place and edited in. But I wish some of the concepts that were like the author actually wanted to tackle, be it like intersectionality with race or class, were actually addressed, rather than just kind of have a word or two popped in there to just be like, remember, there's different kinds of women. We're talking about all of them, but it's different depending on who you're talking about. Like, it was a little artificial, and that is something, honestly, that frustrates me. With some of the stuff that's been released in the last few years, it definitely, there's some language choices that are really feel like they're more about signaling correct thought than actually engaging with an idea. So all that said, I did enjoy this. I didn't enjoy it nearly as much as I thought I would. I do recommend it if you're interested in a historical perspective, specifically about how medicine views women. And especially if you're interested in kind of this like early to mid 20th century period, because the book does dwell a lot on that. But if you're looking for something more modern, I really recommend Doing Harm over that. It touches on medical misogyny a lot more. Invisible Women is the other one that comes to mind. It has a few chapters about medical misogyny, while Doing Harm is like the meat of that. So those are my recommendations over this book. Even though this was good, I gave it a 3.5 stars rounded up. I still wanted a little more. I started off this review saying that the books I read were good, and then I went through them and I'm like, they were fine. They were fine. Most of them were 3-star reads. So, I mean, July was a really good reading month. I did get through some chonkers. I did read a lot of nonfic. I read some middle grade books. Like, it was a good time. But I wouldn't say I read any gems. I think that's kind of what bothered me as I was going through this list. None of these are going to make it to in my like top 3 or top 5 books of the year. Bit bummed out about that. Let me know if you've read any of these, and let me know if you liked any of them more than I did. Like, if I missed something, I really want to know. Let me know if I was too harsh with any of these, or like if I missed something that would actually make some of these books like 4 or 5-star reads. Because yeah, I wanted to like them, and I'm happy overall with my reading month. And I'm happy that I tackled some of these big boys, but at the same time, like I said, none of these stick out as a gem for me. So I'd be really interested in hearing if any of these are like some of your favorite books or anything like that. please tell me about it, because yeah, I like having my mind changed. With good arguments, I'm more than happy to have my mind changed. So I hope you read some really, really good books sometime soon, you know, like amazing 5-star, top 3 best books of 2023. I'm hoping that for myself as well. Have a great rest of your day. Okay, bye.